Welcome to Foundation Module 2. My name's Liz and I'm the Chief Exec here at ORCHA. And this Foundation module is all about how and why we need to have a mechanism and a system for recommending digital health technologies to our patients or clients. Now, sometimes the word prescription can feel a little bit uncomfortable, but I'm going to explain why we're using that word. If you do feel a bit uncomfortable with the word prescription, use the word recommendation. That's absolutely fine. And the first question you might have is, well, why is it important that we have a system or a process for recommending or prescribing digital health technologies? Well, when we're prescribing or recommending anything to our patients or clients, it's really important that we think carefully about not only what we're recommending, but how we're recommending. And it's really important for two key reasons. One is patient safety, and the second is all about governance and managing risk. So before I get into how and why we need to prescribe or recommend digital health therapies and technologies, I just wanted to take a step back and think about what do we mean by patient safety? And I'm just going to use the definition by the World Health Organization. And they say that patient safety is the absence of preventable harm to a patient during the process of healthcare and the reduction of the risk of unnecessary harm associated with healthcare to an acceptable minimum. And the key things here that we need to think about is the fact that what we're saying is we must support patient safety by reducing risk of unnecessary harm and making sure that we prevent harm. And the only way to do that is to have a clear system and process in the recommendation or prescription of any intervention that we make to our patients or clients. Now, why is this important? Well, again, I'm going to take a step back and a step away from digital health. And I'm just going to briefly talk about the prescription of drugs to patients. Now, we have a very clear process in how we prescribe drugs to our patients and how we receive those drugs as patients. So the first step on this journey is a patient feels unwell or has a health need. So they have a consultation. They go and see their doctor or their prescribing nurse or their prescribing therapist, and they have a consultation. And what happens during that consultation is that we as healthcare professionals will listen and work out what the symptoms are and what the need is from a health perspective. We can then go to a repository of drugs. In the UK, it's called the British National Formulary. In other countries, they also have different national drug formularies. And we can go to the National Drug Formulary and find a drug that has gone through all the relevant clinical trials and has been placed in there so that we, as the prescribing healthcare professional, can trust that that drug is safe. What happens then is we then have a mechanism for prescribing that drug to our patient. And that's either through an e-prescription or through a paper prescription. And that piece of paper or e-prescription is really important because it's that piece of paper or e-prescription that the pharmacist will then use to deploy that drug to the patient, and then the patient can go and collect that drug from the pharmacy. The pharmacist is then able to answer questions about that drug and make sure that we as patients use it. And obviously the end point of all this is that the patient's health is improved. Now, during that process, there are key steps that minimise the risk and help ensure that patient safety is established along that process. The first is the critical point of having a national repository or a national formulary for the drug choice. That's really important. Any drug that gets into a national formulary has gone through all the quality checks and clinical trials that are required. And we as prescribing professionals now know which drugs are safe to prescribe. The next step that minimises risk is the actual prescription process. So if I, for example, said to a patient, go to the pharmacist and buy XYZ drug, you may then go and ask for the wrong drug, and therefore the risk is established. So the point of the prescription is to make sure that the patient actually goes and collects the right drug. The next point of minimising risk is the fact that the pharmacist, at point of giving that drug over to a patient, is now able to advise the patient on any questions they have. And because ongoing clinical trials are happening for drugs, if a future problem is found with a drug, in the UK, for example, NICE can do a recall through the prescribers to make sure that anybody who's on that drug is told of a new risk and that drug can be withdrawn should it need to happen. And that process and system has been established to minimise the risk associated with prescribing drugs. The reason I wanted to explain to you that process and system of prescribing drugs will become apparent in the next module when I start talking about how we recommend or prescribe digital health technologies. So now what I wanted to talk to you about was how we're recommending or even prescribing digital health technologies to our patient. Well, across the NHS, we're using a number of different approaches. Some of us might write down on a piece of paper the name of a digital health technology and give that to a patient. Others may be waving their phone at patients and saying, use this app or use this piece of technology. Others might be signposting patients to a list of digital health technologies. And I just want to really pause and think through, well, should we be actually recommending in that way? What are the dangers or what are the problems with recommending digital health technologies, either on paper, by waving a phone, or signposting people to a long list? Well, I had a conversation with a GP not too far away from here, a Dr. Chris Mimner. And what Chris said to me was, well, you wouldn't wave a packet of drugs at a patient and expect them to then go and find that packet of drugs in a shop. And that's what we're doing when we're waving our phones at patients. So if I, for example, waved my phone and said, use this technology, there's a real risk that the patient may then go on and download the wrong technology because there are so many technologies out there. So if I said, go and download app ABC, and then they go to the Apple App Store or Google Play and type in app ABC, they might get lots and lots of different results. Or they may have not quite remembered ABC and thought I said ABE. So there's a real risk in that. Now, it's the same in writing things down on a piece of paper because there are so many technologies. And then signposting patients to a long list is also really confusing because you then enter into a decision-making process as a patient and you're just not quite sure what to do. If you think about the way in which we prescribe medications to our patients, we have a very clear process. And I'm just going to talk through the different steps of that process and then talk about why we need to mirror something similar in the world of digital health technologies. So if we think about how we prescribe medications and the process that we have that enables us to do that safely, the first thing is doctors are trained, health and care professionals are trained in drugs and medications, and we wouldn't ask people to start prescribing drugs without investing in that workforce development up front. The second thing is for the drug itself. what we have is a very clear regulatory process for drugs that come to market, and that takes a long time to go through to prove the safety and efficacy of a medication coming to market. The next thing is, for those drugs that make it to the marketplace, we then put those drugs in the British National Formulary, which is the place that doctors can go to search and find medications that have gone through that process, and to also learn about any contraindications about those drugs. The next step that we have, once a drug has been chosen, is we then have a prescription infrastructure, which means that a doctor can now prescribe a drug via a prescription that you then get and take to your pharmacy, or more and more via e-prescription, which is sent direct to your pharmacy. As a patient, you then go to the pharmacy and collect that drug. And if you've got any questions, you have a place to go to ask. Now, if we stop and think about the way in which we're recommending or prescribing digital health technologies, for most health and care professionals, none of that exists. And that's a real problem because we don't have a safe system to recommend digital health technologies. So if I just go through that process again, but thinking about digital health, and to give you some ideas on how you can make sure that you've got a safe clinical system when you're recommending technology to your patient. So the first thing is that training. Well, that's in part what we're trying to do through this Digital Health Academy. We want to support health and care professionals to learn a little bit more about digital health. There's, of course, far much more learning that needs to happen, but this is the start of that learning. The next thing that we then need is a regulatory process for digital health technologies. Here in the NHS, we do have certain standards that digital health technologies must have met before they get recommended or commissioned for use by people. And so how do we know which technologies have met that standard? Well, we would advise that you make sure that you know before you recommend it whether a piece of technology has met the right standards. And of course, for those of you who have access to an ORCHA Pro account and to ORCHA formularies, you can access that information because everything that has gone through an ORCHA process enters into the formulary. But of course, there are other places that you may want to go to find safe, regulated solutions. The next step on the process is then that formulary idea. How do you know where to go to access a list of digital health technologies and to pick the best one for your patient or client? Again, for those of you who are using the ORCHA Pro license and the formulary, you've got it all there set up, and that obviously allows you to search and filter. If you don't have access to that, please make sure that you think carefully about not only is this digital health technology safe and has met regulatory requirements, but also does it meet the personal preferences and needs of my patient? So for example, if you have a patient that has a hearing impairment, does this product work for somebody with a hearing impairment or a visual impairment, etc.? Does it work on the device they have? So just thinking through some of that context is really important. Now, the next step in the process is then how do you recommend this technology to your patient? And we talked earlier about waving your phone or writing it down. For those of you who have a Pro account, you can use that system to safely recommend or prescribe a technology via text message to your patient. I'll come on to why that's important in a second. If you don't, please do make sure that you've put in place some safe prescription process that allows you to track what's gone to whom and to make sure that the right technology is getting to the patient. And this is really important for governance because in the world of prescribing a drug, that e-prescription or prescription process is all about managing any future risk because it tracks what's gone where to whom. And if a recall needed to happen, it can. So we need to establish exactly the same in the world of digital health. We need a safe clinical system for the prescription or recommendation of a digital health technology that allows for a recall should that product change or update in a safe way. And the final bit that we all have to think about in the system is the gap at the end. Where do patients and people go to really ask questions about this digital health technology? In the world of drugs, we have pharmacies. And what we're seeing emerge in the NHS are new roles. So the R roles across primary care are a good example. Social prescribers, care coordinators. Who in your system is going to look after that end part so that people and patients can go and ask questions should they have them? Now, one really powerful thing about you recommending technologies to your patient is the impact on activation that it has. So in the world of prescribing drugs, what we see is that 74% of people who receive a prescription for a drug will go on and collect it. What we know from our research here at ORCHA is that if a health and care professional recommends a digital health technology to a patient, they are 71% likely to go on and use that technology. And that's 10 times increased by them just going to an app store themselves independently. And so you are the biggest activator in your patient's life in getting them to engage with high quality digital health technologies. If I just take you back to that quote that I showed from the World Health Organization about what patient safety is, and just reflect on what I've said about prescribing or recommending safely. So we talked about the fact that patient safety is the absence of preventable harm to a patient during the process of healthcare and a reduction of risk of unnecessary harm associated with healthcare to an acceptable minimum. If we're going to be recommending digital health technologies to our patients and we really want to prevent harm, we need to make sure that the first thing is they're getting access to safe products. We also then need to put in a process which supports safety and supports the safe prescription of digital health technologies that will then reduce the risk of any unnecessary harm. For example, if a person goes to download a technology independently without these safe processes. We also must think carefully about having the ability to recall if a product changes in the future. And so please, when you're recommending digital health technologies, make sure you think carefully about the process by which you're doing that. So we've now completed Foundation Module 2 and hopefully you feel much more confident about why having a strong system and process to recommend digital health technologies to your patients is important, and you now know how to do that job. That's all great, but there's even more learning to be had. You'll all have different areas of expertise and interest. So what we're inviting you to do next is to pick modules of clinical interest. So you might be interested in mental health, you might be interested in cardiology, you might be interested in diabetes. What you can do now is go and pick your clinical area of interest and learn more about the digital health technologies along that pathway and know more about which product to recommend to which patients at which point in the process. What I'd also like to ask you to do is to try your Pro account now. Recommend an app, even to yourself. Experience the process of how it feels to receive a recommendation of an app and start to see how you can see the data grow around who has been recommended what and whether they went on to convert and use it. I know that when I first started doing this, I did a few tests with family and friends and they loved it, and that really helped me to feel confident to do that more with my patients. So thank you so much for listening, and we'll look forward to seeing you in the next modules.